Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Whiteboard History, where we look at some of the more controversial issues of history and try and reshape how we think about certain events. Today, we're going to be talking about the Tet Offensive and whether or not the United States won or lost the battle, and how that ultimately changed the outcome of the Vietnam War. The Tet Offensive occurred on January 31st, 1968, during the lunar holiday known as Tet, obviously where the name Tet Offensive came from. The Tet Offensive was undoubtedly the largest of the war, with more than 70,000 North Vietnamese and Viet Cong forces attacking 100 cities and towns throughout South Vietnam. The main objective of the Communist forces during the Tet Offensive was actually not to take and hold these South Vietnamese towns, but rather to instill a rebellion among the people in the hopes that they would renounce the US-backed Saigon regime and accept the communist government throughout the entirety of Vietnam. So how did this enormous series of battles play out, and who actually came out on top? Well, in a purely tactical sense, the US and ARVN forces successfully repelled the communist attacks and actually later staged counteroffensive that were fairly successful in their own right. As far as casualties, the records are split into phases representing the different stages of the offensive. In Phase 1, the South Vietnamese and US forces, as well as some other ancillary allies, sustained an estimated 45,820 casualties, while the communist forces sustained over 75,000. In Phase 3, the exact total of casualties is not known. However, it is estimated that the communist forces lost more than 111,000 men. Now, obviously, the differential in casualties does not mean that the offensive was a tremendous success for the United States, but the fact that the communist forces were unable to achieve their goal of creating a revolution and lost significantly more men in the process signals a clear defeat for the communist side. Now, whether or not that means that it's a victory for the United States is up for debate. Obviously, losing thousands of men is nothing to celebrate, but they were able to hold their ground. So in a purely tactical sense, the US forces along with the South Vietnamese won the Tet Offensive. So why then does the offensive carry such a negative reputation in American history as a battle that turned the tides of the Vietnam War? Well, 1968 was a particularly tumultuous year for the United States, both overseas and at home. The Vietnam War had become very unpopular for the American people, and President Johnson's administration had been telling the American people that the war was on the verge of ending to quell public uproar. However, the Tet Offensive threw that notion out the window. If the war was supposed to be ending, how was the Communist Army of North Vietnam able to send a massive offensive, a surprise offensive at that, of more than 70,000 men into South Vietnam? Also, the media coverage of the Tet Offensive also exacerbated the frustration among the American people. As many of you know, media coverage of the Vietnam revolutionized how the home front saw a war. Most media coverage came from the Battle of Hue. In Hue, the North Vietnamese and Viet Cong occupied the city, and before the US were able to take the city back, the communist forces executed thousands of citizens and buried them in mass graves. When the US retook the city, the media discovered the atrocities that had taken place, and like many other media portrayals of the war, the story of what had occurred at Hue only outraged the American people further and solidified the fact that the war was far from over. So when we ask the question, who won the Tet Offensive, the answer isn't so black and white. The United States and allies in every respect warded off the Tet Offensive, but the fact that in 1968 the North Vietnamese could attack with 70,000 men despite the Johnson administration's claims that the end of the war was near brought the level of dissent towards the Vietnam War among the American people to the point of no return. So I hope you learned a little bit today. I hope you took something from the video. I hope you gained some different perspectives here today. Although the United States may not have lost the Tet Offensive in a purely militaristic or tactical sense, the implications that it brought to the American home front signaled a larger defeat, bigger than the battlefield for the United States. Remember, history is not as black and white as we'd like it to be sometimes, and winners and losers aren't as clear as we'd like them to be. This has been Whiteboard History. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.